Hello, this is Dorie Clark, and we are here for our weekly edition of the Newsweek interview show Better. And this week's guests are Nathan and Susannah Furr. They are the authors of the new book, The Upside of Uncertainty. Sounds like an oxymoron, but they claim it's not. So we're going to hear all about that. We're going to hear about thwacking your way through the path of the unknown. Nathan and Susannah, so glad to have you guys here.
Glad to be here.
Great to be here.
Wonderful. And welcome to everyone who is tuning in to join us from around the world. Please feel free to type into the chat box and let us know who you are and where you are dialing in from. Nathan and Susannah are hanging out in a cottage in Normandy, so they've got it figured out. But we'd love to hear where you are and any questions that you have about the upside, the potential upside. We'll see what kind of a case they make for uncertainty. So Nathan and Susannah, my first question. We know, you say it in your introduction, and I think many of us know instinctively, uncertainty is deeply unsettling for most people. This is evolutionarily, we are hardwired to really, really not like the state of not knowing what's going on. You claim that we actually should get past that we need to reframe it, think about it in a different way, that there is in fact an upside. So number one, make the case for us. And number two, how easy or hard is it to do it? Because it sounds like that would actually maybe be a heavy lift competing against evolution. Help us out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the real insight for this book, or the spark that led to this book, was I've been interviewing innovators for well over 20 years. Some big names, people like Elon Musk, Indra Nooyi, and people who have really changed the world, and also names that maybe don't make the headlines as much. And the thing that stuck out to me is that to do anything new, any of the stuff we talk about or we praise, all of that required that person first go through the uncertainty. They had to take a risk. They had to step into the unknown. They had to leave a job. They had to do something different. And so I would really push everybody who's listening to say, for yourself, anything you're proud of, a career move, a geographic move, a relationship, whatever it may be, reflect back. That probably only came after a moment of uncertainty. And so the realization at the beginning was, wow, we see uncertainty, but the other side of that coin is really possibility. And we forget that. Now, we're not saying there aren't downsides to uncertainty. We all get anxious. We all get nervous. And there are other kinds of uncertainties, the kinds that happen to us, like with the pandemic, which, again, we acknowledge those downsides. But if you reflect back on your experience during the pandemic, I would challenge you and say, I bet you found there were possibilities you discovered in that as well. So this core theme of uncertainty and possibility are really two sides of the same coin, and that's what we forget.
I'd love to jump in and talk about, is it easy or hard? And
I'd love to hear it. Thank you, Susannah.
Yeah. Yes, I think that actually it's both. I think the first moment of like seeing the possibility when you're having that wiring that's so stressful, that's hard. But if you can just trust us and go for this moment, which we like to call transilience, which is from a Latin word, the root meaning to leap from one state to another. So think about this moment when you're like, I'm not doing that, or this is too stressful, I'm giving up. If you can just stick with this idea, like, okay, what possibility could be beyond this? Then there is this moment where you can do the thing. It might even be a little clumsy or awkward, but getting to that place where you have a good experience with waiting for the possibility to come. And we are kind of addicted to that now. Like, we've had enough good ones that when we start getting in that mode where it's working, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but like, ooh, we got to this new platform that we love, then you kind of want to start doing it more. So we want to encourage people, go for the possibility, but be willing to have that wiring that's kind of totally anxiety producing.
All right, that sounds great. You're making the case. We're here with Nathan and Susannah Furr. Their book is The Upside of Uncertainty. If you want to learn more about them and their work, you can check out their website at uncertaintypossibility.com. And we want to say hi to some of the great friends who are tuning in from around the world. We've got Carlos joining us from Medellin. We've got Diana from South Carolina. Chef Ilyas is in the house. Prashant from India. Anant from Toronto. Allison from Dallas. Chef Ilyas is from Sri Lanka. Debbie's in Virginia. Michaela is from Greenville, South Carolina. Julia's from Nigeria. Renan from Sao Paulo. Bree from Knoxville. Farhad from Kentucky. Sarah from Oklahoma City. Jeannie is on a train in Rhode Island. We've got a LinkedIn friend. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. LinkedIn friends from Washington, from Portugal, and perhaps my favorite, Ryan says, I am certain I am joining from Washington State.
I love that.
Glad to hear it, Ryan. We're glad to have all of you guys in the house. Please type in your questions for Nathan and Susannah Furr, the upside of uncertainty. We're exploring how to get through the unknown. And so, Susannah, I wanted to ask you a question. I was curious, in the book, one of the points that you talk about is a concept known as possibility quotient. I thought this was really interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what it is and how we should be thinking about it?
Sure. So basically, I loved that word of quotient. And, I never really went far in math, but actually I should have, because my daughters did, and they did awesome. And I love math. So quotient, this equation. And the idea is, can you create a bigger sale to catch more possibilities? So people that have a high possibility quotient are looking for options. They're looking for adjacent possibles. That's a tool we use in the book. They're looking to get on the frontiers. They are not just saying, you know what, this is how my life is. I kind of wish I could change these things, but you know what? It's kind of like I'm stressed. I'm just going to keep going because things are working. No, possibility quotient is when you are putting yourself in situations, you're speaking up, you're taking advantage of really just even subtle things that are kind of calling to you, and you're getting out there so that the potential for you to see possibility and harness it is going to be higher. So, we even envision like P plus, we were trying to come up with an equation, but the quotient idea is just, how do you increase that ability to get more possibility that you want?
That's great. Thank you very much. We want to say hi to some other friends tuning in. Patanan is here, Abbas. We have our friend Adnan in Turkey. Tandeka is from Johannesburg. We have Sushma from India. Ashley is here. We have Michaela. We have Alan from Milpitas, California. Sapita from Birmingham, UK. Fatima from the UK. Liz from St. Augustine. Abi from Atlanta. We have a LinkedIn friend from San Antonio, and Christine is here from Rochester. Ellen from New York City. Kate from Pennsylvania, and many more. And a great question came in from Bree, and she wants to know, no matter what type of uncertainty you're in, most of us usually have some kind of a desired outcome in mind. What are some concrete steps you can take to try to manifest that outcome? How do we balance this sort of uncertainty with, we actually have a thing we want to do? Nathan, would you be willing to tackle that for us?
Yeah, I'm going to answer it kind of in two ways. Number one is it possible to set yourself up like you dream of something, whatever it may be? Maybe you want to write a book, maybe you want to, start a podcast, and you want to set yourself up for success, right? How do you've got a visitor too. Hello to you.
He heard I was doing an episode on fur, and he said, well, that's me. That's me.
Yeah. So can you set yourself up to try something new so that you can't fail? And one of the ideas we talk about in the book is this idea of values over goals. So when you're on uncertainty, we're always tempted to set a goal. Let's say you're a startup entrepreneur. I'm going to hit 10 million in year 3. But really, you actually have no control over whether you're going to hit that goal or not. And making that goal doesn't make it happen. Instead, what you end up doing is you end up being really stressed out and really instrumental in trying to get to that goal. Versus if you focused on what's my value that I want to achieve, you can actually be a lot less stressed. So a great example of this is the entrepreneur David Hanmeyer Hansen. He did Ruby on Rails and Basecamp and a bunch of other companies. He's a legend in the entrepreneurial world. But he says, when I go into a new project, my value is I want to write great software, treat my people well, and interact with in an ethical way with the market. And he said, when I focus on that value, I'm okay with whatever happens, because at the end of 2 years and it's millions that he's putting in at this stage, I know that I will have written great software. I'll have learned something. I'll have treated the people I work with well, and I've been ethical. And I think that's a really good principle. And I'll just illustrate it, with this book. I mean, we started this book a decade before the pandemic, but when the pandemic hit and suddenly every guru out there is grounded and has lots of time and is talking about uncertainty, I started to freak out and say, oh my gosh, we're going to get scooped. Somebody's going to beat us to it. And Susannah, who's like entrepreneur, innovator, and contrarian says, well, wait a minute, apply this. But what's the value here? Write something that's the best work you could do to help your friends find their way through uncertainty, to create the lives they want to create. And that would be good enough. And when I did that, I really de-stressed. And, as it turned out, that was the right way to go. And so I would just say, number one, focus on your values over your goals. Number two, there's a lot of empirical research that shows that the best way to tackle a project is to break it down into a series of small steps or small experiments. Ask, what could I do this week? What could I do this month? And get going on that right away. And also, by the way, there's some great empirical research that match case studies of startups and failures and successes, all that great stuff that shows you don't have to do everything at once. Like, you can focus on one thing at a time to really learn and dig into it, get that good enough, and then you can switch to something else, kind of like how a chef juggles, pots. So again, just to review, values over goals. Number two, break it down into small steps, get going right away. And number three, you don't have to do it all at once. Be like a chef who's focusing on the most important thing for a little bit and then rotate it to the back burner.
Really helpful. That's great. We're here with Nathan and Susannah Furr. It is The Upside of Uncertainty that we are talking about. That is their new book, and you can learn more at uncertaintypossibility.com. And if you are enjoying this conversation, well, why not have your friends benefit from it? Hit the like button, hit the share button so that they can benefit and learn about how they can thwack their way through the unknown together. We want to say hi to some of our amazing viewers and friends from around the world. We've got great people tuning in, like Malini joining from Melbourne. She is up either really early or really late. So thanks for tuning in, Malini. We've got Josephine from Montreal, Maria from Oakland. We've got Shizan from India. We have Max, your neighbor in France. We have Ingrid from Turkey. We have Rockmount Enterprises from Pakistan, and Dorina from Florida, and Cynthia from Phoenix. We love having all of you here. And a great question came in. Susannah, maybe you can tackle this if you don't mind, from Kate. Sure. And Kate was curious. She says, how do you cope well with uncertainty in multiple life domains at the same time? A lot of us are reasonably resilient. We can tackle one problem, but if all of a sudden we've got three things where we have this existential uncertainty, that can start to get a little old. How do we deal with that? What are your thoughts?
Okay. Well, our book is actually arranged around the first aid cross for uncertainty. So if you can picture just a red cross and four arms of the cross comprising the different categories. So we have reframe, which is kind of what we were talking about, having that light switch moment when you can see possibility instead of just the fear. And at the underneath, on like the north south, we have sustain. And I would say when multiple life domains are throwing uncertainty at us, we really need to focus on those sustain tools. And sustaining ourselves really is so critical, because it obviously, if we're doing something and it's not really going that well, or there are too many stressors, it means that we've taken the leap and we've started going into it. And the risk is that we're going to give up, or we're going to start having negative self-talk and maybe maladapt. So we might choose something just to get some certainty somewhere. And we really agree that we shouldn't take on too many uncertainties at once. So if there is an uncertain thing that you can set aside, that could be a really great thing, like lower the temperature. But for the ones that are really demanding you look at them, there are things we can do to calm ourselves. So uncertainty balancers was one of our favorite tools. And that's actually if you're looking at the cross on the left arm, that's a prime tool, priming ourselves for when uncertainty happens. And uncertainty balancers can be cool things like creating rituals or comforting things you do that you look forward to, so that at the end of a long day, like, oh, I'm going to have that call with my best friend, or I'm going to go to my favorite restaurant every Thursday, because we are creatures. And so when we're feeling that anxiety, those creature comforts, it can be, a life coach visit. It can be watching a show that you love. We just don't want to do too many of those kind of distracting ones, you know?
One of the great myths about uncertainty is that, when you hear innovators talk about it, they'll say things like, oh, I love uncertainty, or I eat uncertainty for breakfast. And you're like, whoa, that's not me. I feel too stressed out. But when we dug down in our interviews, you discovered some really surprising uncertainty balancers. So like these people would like fly on the same seat of the plane, stay in the same hotel, the same room of the hotel, carry their breakfast with them. They had done all these things to create certainty in aspects of their life so that they could tolerate the uncertainty in others. So yeah, that uncertainty balancers that Susannah was talking about is really, really a great way to kind of bring down the heat in other areas of our life.
That is a really useful point. Thank you. We're here with Nathan and Susannah Furr. They're the authors of The Upside of Uncertainty, the new book. It came out 10 days ago. So this is hot off the presses. And you can ask their questions. Just type them into the chat box. We want to hear what's on your mind. We're talking about uncertainty. We're talking about possibility. And we're joined by wonderful friends from around the world. Carl is here from Brazil. Andrew from Austin. Beata is joining from Geneva. Cheryl in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Liz is tuning in from Shanghai. Lainey from Chicago. We have a LinkedIn friend from Santa Clara, California. Shashi Dara is here from Houston. And we have Patrick or Eddie from Jersey City. We've got Gokhan in Turkey, Armando from Salt Lake City, and Haslinda from Kuala Lumpur. We are so glad all of you are joining. Please type your questions for Nathan and Susannah into the chat box. Now, a wonderful question came in. Nathan, maybe you can tackle this if you don't mind. From Michaela, she wants to know, would you say there's a link between uncertainty and creativity? Now, I know you've written multiple books about innovation. You must have thoughts. Please share.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the thing so one of the things I do, I'm a professor in a business school, and I work with businesses. And one of the kind of paradoxes I see is that they'll say, we want more innovation, but they don't want to take any risks. They don't want any uncertainty. And I tell them that's going to be impossible, right? You are not going to get any innovation if you're unwilling to take any risks. Uncertainty is a critical part of creativity. And, it's funny, one of the tools we wrote about was called reverse insurance. And it was inspired by a conversation with the head of a national gambling organization. And he said, the way I think about my business is it's reverse insurance. It's for people whose lives have become so stable, so certain. They actually will pay us to inject some uncertainty into our lives. And a colleague of mine at University College London, he actually went out and studied some of the great culinary teams of the world. And what he found is to get more creative, they would actually purposely inject uncertainty into their work. They would tear things up. They would tear apart the kitchen. They would choose to make things more uncertainty because it made them more creative. So what I would say is, again, uncertainty and possibility are two sides of the same coin. We forget that. We get so hung up on the uncertainty that we try to avoid it because it makes us feel anxious. And as a result, we are not creative. We don't see those possibilities. And I guess I would say to support that statement, there's a lot of good evidence showing that creative teams actually choose to inject uncertainty in. And so, we're all kind of doing different things in our lives, but I think it's a fun question to ask no matter what you're doing. If you're feeling kind of bored or burned out, say, well, how could I inject some uncertainty in a good way? And one of the tools we talk about is the frontier. Like there's actually, we often live our lives far back from the frontier of career or relationship or say entertainment or physical. And what would it mean to kind of step onto the frontier? Because innovators, they actually love frontiers. One of the innovators we studied, he said, frontier is where you do your best work. So I would just say, think about any aspect of your life and say, where are the frontiers? Don't get on all of them at once. That's too much. But ask, how could I step onto the frontier and inject a little uncertainty in my life? It might seem a little scary at first, but man, it's super fun. We're kind of addicted to that now.
Oh, that's fantastic, Nathan. Thank you so much. And for the audience tuning in, I actually have a question for you. I would love to hear from you. Please type into the chat box and share your experience. The past couple of years have been a pretty uncertain time. If you can share some of the successes that you've had or some of the experiences that you've had, what is your upside of uncertainty? We would love to hear about what you've done, what you've learned, what you've experienced during uncertain times. So please feel free to share your stories in the chat box. We'd love to hear them. Again, we're here with Nathan and Susannah Furr. They're the authors of The Upside of Uncertainty. We're taking your questions, and we want to say hi to Celeste from Nicaragua. We have Adam from New York, Sharon from New York. We have Jose from Ecuador, Omome from France. We have Alexander tuning in from Uruguay, Adriana from Mexico, India from California, which is slightly confusing, but I like it. We have a LinkedIn friend from Oslo. Andreas is joining us from Austria, Akmal from UAE, Parthiban from India, Doreen from Ohio, Maria Victoria from Miami, and Ola from DC. We are so glad to have all of you. If you like this episode and the insights of Nathan and Susannah Furr, hit the like button, hit the share button. Susannah, my next question for you is let's bring it to the personal level here. Maybe you can talk about an experience that you've had personally, or that you and Nathan have had personally, with regard to uncertainty. How did this become something that you have practiced and lived out in your own life?
Wow. I don't know which one to pick, but I guess I think I'll share about writing this book, deciding to be co-authors, because I think it's the most recent thing we've been dealing with. And honestly, we both had so many ideas for how to do this, come together. Nathan's much more academic. I'm kind of always scheming about starting new companies or doing things, and I'm a designer, but we realized, okay, let's work on this project together. And at that moment we thought, okay, good, smooth sailing. But there have been a lot of moments of who's going to do what. And Nathan needed to kind of pick up more like at home with kids. And it was really an interesting thing because it felt so personal that we were like, we're going to be these experts in this arena because we love it so much. We've done a lot of things that felt risky, that turned out well, like moving to France, for instance. And ultimately writing this book has been something where we now feel like it's changed our lives in our relationship. And I guess maybe that's too personal. Maybe I should have used something that was more realistic for everybody. But I would say, think about people you can collaborate with, or people that you've been feeling like you don't work well together. Because for us going forward, we have learned it's so important to get more eyes on a project than just one. And I love hearing the names of these people, can I just say, from all over the world. The upside of uncertainty is so exciting when everybody can get to that place where they can see one. Like, I want everyone to feel like there's an upside for everybody. It's not just for like us because we figured this out. No, our message is that everybody, whether it is in your relationship or at your workplace or as a single parent or as in someone who doesn't have children and wishes they did, in every single case, we can really find our strength by just believing that there is an upside, even when we don't like the scenario we're in.
Yeah, Dorie, if I could jump in there and just share something really different in hopes that, if somebody's feeling really stressed out right now and saying, oh, that sounds great, but I'm feeling really anxious. I'll just share an important moment writing this book, which was that we were in the middle of writing this when the pandemic hit. And most of my income comes from speaking and teaching, and that disappeared in 5 days. It was gone. And we have kids in university, we have mortgage payment. And so I was freaking out. I was staying up late, waking up early. And Susannah said to me, if you can't apply these tools to help yourself, you don't get to write this book. So again, contrarian. Yeah, she held my feet to the fire. But she was right. And so the next morning when I woke up early, really anxious, like, am I going to go bankrupt? Am I going to lose my job? These are common stresses. One of the tools we talk about in the sustain section is when a setback happens, you focus on being grateful for what you have, not just focusing on what you've lost. And so as I remember this tool, and all of a sudden I woke up because I was in the middle of grinding these coffee beans and I could smell their rich earthiness. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a beautiful smell. And then I noticed the sunlight coming in the kitchen. It'd been there the whole time, but suddenly I just noticed it. I said, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful because this is a gorgeous morning. And at that moment, I realized I could lose it all. I could go bankrupt. I could lose the job, and I would still have a beautiful morning. I would still have these coffee beans. I would still have relationships with people I care about. And it was like the stress fell off my shoulders because I was focused on all the things I would have regardless of losing those things in this uncertainty. And so I think that's another really, I just, depending on where you're at, I just wanted to share that because I feel like it's very helpful for both seeing new things, but also responding to setbacks.
Really helpful. Thank you. Nathan and Susannah Furr, they're the authors of the book, The Upside of Uncertainty. If you want to learn more about their work, you can check it out at uncertainty possibility.com. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of our weekly Newsweek Better sessions, this takes place every Thursday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, 6 o'clock in France. You can go follow me on LinkedIn. You can go to dorieclark.com/LinkedIn. You can follow there, sign up for my LinkedIn newsletter. You'll get reminders about these. And we also want to make sure that we're saying hi to our terrific friends from around the world who are joining us. We have so many awesome folks. We have Ola from Portugal, Suzanne's joining us from Germany, Susan from Kenya, Alexandra from Greece, and people are chiming in with some of their experiences about the upside of uncertainty. I love these. We have Susan who says, I jumped into uncertainty by quitting my corporate job and starting a team coaching business. Good job, Susan. This is great. We have Kelly, who's test driving companies. She says, I worked at a consultant. I'm trying different companies until I find the fit. So that's awesome. And our friend Mark is joining us. He said he has an in-person men's circle that he took online during the pandemic, and now men from around the world are joining. So that is very cool. And congrats to everybody who is doing this. I love it. Susannah, a question that I had, this came from one of my favorite parts of your book. This was just, sort of a short anecdote, but I thought it was really great. You told the story about a woman, I guess this was a colleague of yours, who was in Berlin, or somewhere in the Eastern Bloc right after the Berlin Wall fell. And this woman said that she kept hearing from people, who on the other side of the wall, well, now that I'm free, I'm going to do this. And now that I'm free, I'm going to do that. And of course, she was a Westerner, and she was like, oh, geez. Well, yeah, I'm already free. So what am I going to do? And I thought that was a fantastic story about kind of reframing and understanding that, we need to be taking advantage of some of this. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, I love that story so much too. I wish she was my friend. I don't know her personally, but she's done amazing things, including SheEO. So she funds women's organizations and companies. But basically, I felt like when I read that, it happened for me in that moment. Like, wait, I'm free. We're all, we're not all free, but many of us are free and don't see it that way. And so it's perfect story of reframing in an instant, because these people had not had that experience, and they were able to feel like they'd already known what they would do. And so they had all this, they were able to just have these expansive experiences because it was like they were waiting for that moment. And so when we have that moment of claiming that we've been free, but we weren't really using it maybe as well as we could, then what's possible when you tell yourself that? I think it's a mantra you can wake up and say, okay, even if you have really hard things that feel, there are certainties that don't feel good that we have to wade through and try to look for portals to leave that behind. But what about being able to wake up and just say, wow, I'm free today to do, at least I have a little bit of choice. What would I do? So.
Yeah, so powerful. That's great. We have time for just about one more question. Nathan, I would love it if you could tackle this for us. The question came in from Susan, and she wants to know, can you talk about managed risk versus leaping off cliffs? We have the sort of the famous books or mantra, leap and the net will appear, which always sounded a little potentially dodgy to me. but what are the potential upsides and downsides? How do we think this through?
It's a great question. And just the short punchline would be, it's a bit of a myth that you have to leap off a cliff and go all in. So we got to interview the gentleman who won the Nobel Prize in chemistry in 2016, Ben Feringa. And we asked him about how he taught his students to navigate the uncertainty of going after breakthroughs. He actually said, I always teach them to have one project that's a little more certain and one project that's a little riskier or more uncertain. Because if you only have the uncertain project, you'll ride it too far, ride it too long. You won't have that honest moment that, hey, maybe I need to change course. And you'll also be incredibly stressed out. And what he was teaching is a principle we call personal real options. This idea that you should really pursue multiple things in your life. And by the way, there's some great empirical research that shows that hybrid entrepreneurs, meaning entrepreneurs who kind of keep their job and do something new on the side, often are more successful because they have more time to figure it out and less stress to kind of pay the bills. And it's this principle of having multiple things going. And now it's a great idea, but I just want to issue one warning. That is that most of us, the challenge is not that we're going all in on the uncertain, risky option. The challenge is that we're going all in on the safe options. And so my encouragement would be, do a personal real options approach. Make room for the things that your heart is asking you to do. It doesn't mean you have to give up everything. Take a personal real options approach to it.
That's great. I couldn't agree more. And in my first book, Reinventing You, I talk about this, that often one of the best paths is keep the day job and explore, but explore without endangering yourself. So I think that's a wonderful point. We have been here with Nathan Furr and Susannah Harmon Furr. They are the authors of this book. It is The Upside of Uncertainty. If you would like to learn more about them, which I suggest you do, you can go to uncertaintypossibility.com. That is their website. Nathan and Susannah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dorie.
Thank you.
It's been fun.
So fun to chat.
Thank you to all the listeners.
Yeah, great to meet all you.
Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.